All right. So for this test, we're only going to be looking at the things that are eighth grade standards, not the sixth and seventh grade stuff, which means you're not really going to see anything about planets, but you're mostly going to be looking at universe stuff. Now, if you're to hit start at the beginning of everything, trying to understand universe theory, you have the Big Bang. You've got to understand that the universe is expanding outwards, and therefore, all these nebula that are being created, space dust, right? The universe in itself is a hierarchy. And whenever you're picking things on a hierarchy, you should start at the top. Think big. For example, if I were to ask on a test question, a universe is made up of blank, you're not going to say stars. Yes, it's made up of stars, but you want to try to pick galaxies. That's the biggest form. And the universe is so big and so there's so much movement and so much three dimension that remember that we use parallax, which is basically pretending that things are frozen, right? Which is this concept of measuring light years in a model type system where things aren't moving. So parallax is a way that we measure distances between stars. When we say space dust, don't think vacuum cleaner. Primarily, think of like a nebula. When you think life cycle of stars, try to relate that big nebula equals big stars, right? Those super giants. Take a look at those diagrams again. The end, there's a lot of questions on the end of the life cycle. The smaller stars, for example, are going to end up as white dwarfs, whereas the big stars are going to end up as black holes, which suck in matter and energy, versus neutron stars, which push out matter and energy. And then orbits. Understand what creates an orbit. Two different arrows that create an orbit. So things keep moving in the form of inertia in outer space. Think throwing a baseball in outer space. And they fall towards an object, which is gravity. That combination of that X and Y creates the orbit circling around the star. The brightness of a star, we measure more brightness with apparent brightness, and we measure less brightness, which with distance from Earth. Remember the mnemonic that we created as well for the parts of the sun. You got to be able to touch base on parts of the sun and know a little bit about each one. Then you want to be able to compare things that you are looking up at the sky, the night sky, for example, and you see something flying across the sky. What is it? The difference between an asteroid and a moon, the difference between a comet and a moon, the difference between a comet and an asteroid. What is a meteor? What is a meteorite? Which one of those is just going to burn up and you're not even going to see it because it's so small, right? Get my joke there with the ice cream cone because it's a comet. And then a few different facts and things that you have to know. You have to know what heliocentric means. Heliocentric and how it's different than geocentric. The Greeks were the ones that came up. They started looking at different ways in which it didn't look like the sun orbited Earth, and the reasoning between why. We're going to talk specifically in class about the different sciences that I expect you to kind of remember. Moon cycle and the Earth's axis, what creates the moon cycle, what creates seasons, what creates day and night. If I'm standing at the equator, how do I see Earth light and dark, the day and night, relative to if I'm standing at the poles, for example. And then the last kind of thing is going to be embedded in these standards is Florida and specifically the Space Coast. How does space industry and it's we had that debate in class about whether to push economy towards space industry or not, but what does space industry create for us? Specifically, tourism. You're going to have economy. You're going to have math and science in schools. You got to remember that Florida is benefited by space technology in things like tech development. And then space technology, like recognizing some of these words like Hubble, right, as a telescope. What is it that telescopes allow us to do? They allow us to study things that are far away. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but you've got to be able to pick up on words like that. Hubble is the one that I see in a lot of different fast style questions. So that's one that I want to make sure that I mention in my video. You're going to want to pause for the question of the week at the end of this. So I want you to explain the concept of a light year. Why do we use a light year? What kind of measure is a light year? There's a little bit of a hint in the second part of a question, which is why is it that a scientist has to infer things while looking at outer space? We don't see exactly what is happening right now. Why? Once you explain a light year, it'll be a little bit more obvious why I added that part of the question. It'll help guide. You're using the question to help guide your answer. So pause, think about what a light year is. Think about what that word infer. There's a reason why I'm mentioning that word. And that's your question of the week.